The truth behind the matrix: are we living in an illusion? Have you ever asked yourself, are we truly living in the world we think we are? The idea that what we perceive as reality might not be what it seems has intrigued philosophers, scientists, and thinkers for centuries. The Matrix, a science fiction movie, introduced a question that isn't just a cinematic plot but a real philosophical dilemma: what if we are living in a simulation? Today, we delve into the simulation hypothesis, a theory that suggests everything we perceive, from the stars in the sky to the ground beneath our feet, could be part of an artificial construct. We will explore the philosophical and scientific perspectives on this hypothesis and examine the implications it holds for the nature of reality, illusion, and consciousness. Section 1: The Simulation Hypothesis. The simulation hypothesis proposes that advanced civilizations may have the technological ability to create hyperrealistic simulations of entire worlds, and the inhabitants of these simulations would be unaware that their world is artificial. This theory raises profound philosophical and existential questions. Are we merely characters in a game controlled by an external entity? If our world is an illusion, what does that mean for our free will, our sense of self, and our place in the universe? The concept was popularized in 2003 by philosopher Bostrom, who argued that one of three things must be true. 1. Human civilization will go extinct before reaching a post-human stage capable of creating realistic simulations. 2. Post-human civilizations are uninterested in creating simulations of their ancestors. 3. We are almost certainly living in a computer simulation. According to Bostrom, if we are living in a simulation, then the odds of us living in the base reality, the original, non-simulated world, are extremely low. This is a fascinating yet troubling thought. If we are living in a simulation, it could mean that everything we know, our physical universe, our emotions, our experiences, is just an illusion created by a superintelligent civilization. But why would they create such a simulation? And what role do we play in this simulated reality? The questions raised by the simulation hypothesis challenge the very nature of existence. If our experiences are simulated, does it change our understanding of life, death, and consciousness? What does it mean to be truly alive if everything around us is artificially constructed? These questions have led scientists, philosophers, and thinkers to explore the nature of our reality and how much of it is real. Section 2: Scientific Evidence and Quantum Mechanics. The simulation hypothesis is not just a philosophical concept, it has garnered attention from the scientific community as well. One of the most compelling areas of evidence for the simulation hypothesis comes from the field of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is the study of subatomic particles and their behaviors, which often seem to defy the logic of classical physics. The famous wave-particle duality observed in quantum particles suggests that particles do not exist in a definite state until they are observed, which some theorists argue could be explained if our universe operates like a simulation, rendering only the parts of reality that we observe. In quantum mechanics, particles can exist in multiple states at once, and it is only when they are observed that they collapse into a single state. This phenomenon is known as quantum superposition. The idea that particles do not have a fixed state until they are observed aligns with the concept of a simulated reality. If we are living in a simulation, then the universe would only render the aspects of reality that we observe, much like how video game environments are only rendered when the player is looking at them. Another key concept in quantum mechanics is entanglement, in which particles that are separated by vast distances can instantaneously affect one another. This phenomenon appears to defy the laws of physics as we understand them and could potentially be explained by the existence of a hidden code underlying the universe, much like how the code behind a video game dictates the behavior of characters and environments in the game world. In 2012, physicists Silas Bean and Zohar Ringel proposed a model suggesting that our universe could be a lattice-like structure, much like the grid used in computer simulations. If this theory holds true, it could provide evidence that we live in a computational structure, with the universe made up of discrete units or quantum bits, much like pixels in a digital image. Additionally, the fine-tuning of the universe, the precise calibration of constants in physics that allow life to exist, is often cited as evidence of a designer or creator. Some proponents of the simulation hypothesis argue that this fine-tuning could be the result of a simulation's creators carefully programming the laws of nature to support life. If the constants of nature were even slightly different, life as we know it would be impossible. The universe we live in seems to be perfectly suited for life, but could this perfect design actually be the result of a simulated environment, engineered by advanced beings? Section 3. Philosophical implications of the simulation hypothesis. If we accept that we may be living in a simulation, the question arises: what does this mean for our understanding of consciousness and existence? According to philosopher René Descartes, the only thing we can be sure of is our own consciousness. Cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. But if our thoughts and consciousness are merely the result of a simulation, does this diminish the authenticity of our experiences? Some philosophers argue that even if we live in a simulated reality, our experiences and consciousness still have meaning. Existentialism, for instance, posits that the meaning of life is derived from our experiences, regardless of whether those experiences are real or simulated. As long as we experience the world as real, our thoughts, emotions, and actions are significant. In this view, even if our reality is simulated, the emotional and psychological experiences we have are still valid and important. Others argue that the concept of a simulated reality undermines free will. If our actions are predetermined by a computer program, can we truly be free? Are we simply following a script, like characters in a video game? This brings us to the fundamental question of whether we can truly shape our own destinies, or if we are just following a preordained path created by the simulation. Many thinkers have also raised the question of whether consciousness can exist outside of a simulated reality. If consciousness is simply a byproduct of the simulation, then is it possible for humans to ever transcend the simulation and reach a higher level of awareness? Is our consciousness limited by the confines of the simulation, or could it break free to discover the true nature of existence? Section 4. The role of consciousness and free will in a simulated reality. If we are indeed living in a simulation, what does this say about the nature of consciousness and free will? Can we ever break free from the simulation, or are we trapped within it forever? The idea of free will in a simulated reality is particularly problematic. If everything in our universe is controlled by a set of algorithms, then our thoughts, actions, and decisions may already be determined by the simulation. This raises profound questions about the nature of personal agency and responsibility. If we are not truly free, can we still be held accountable for our actions? However, some theorists argue that consciousness could be the key to breaking free from the simulation. The idea is that our awareness and perception of the world are what create our reality. If we can transcend the limitations of our perception, we may be able to break out of the simulation and reach a higher level of consciousness. But how would we even know if we were able to achieve such a feat? Other thinkers argue that free will could still exist within the simulation. They suggest that even though our reality may be artificially constructed, we still have the ability to make choices and decisions within the confines of the simulation. This idea proposes that the simulation might allow for a degree of unpredictability and complexity, which makes our choices appear free, even if they are ultimately determined by the underlying code. Section 5. The search for evidence: how to prove we are in a simulation. One of the biggest challenges of the simulation hypothesis is the difficulty of proving or disproving it. Since we cannot observe the creators of the simulation or the underlying code, the theory is essentially untestable. This raises the question: can a theory that cannot be tested be considered scientific? According to philosopher Karl Popper, any theory that cannot be falsified, meaning proven false through evidence, should not be considered a valid scientific theory. Yet, some scientists have proposed ways to test the hypothesis. For example, Physicist Silas Bean suggested that if our universe is a simulation, we should be able to detect irregularities in the laws of physics, such as a grid-like structure at the quantum level. This is because, like any computer simulation, there would likely be limitations or constraints on the resolution of the universe. If we can detect these irregularities, it might suggest that we are living in a simulation. Other researchers have explored the possibility of finding glitches in the fabric of reality, anomalies in the laws of physics or occurrences that don't fit the natural order. While these ideas are still speculative, they raise the intriguing possibility that the search for evidence of the simulation might one day yield answers to the question of whether we are living in an illusion. Section 6. The future of simulation technology. Will we create our own simulations? As technology advances, the possibility of creating realistic simulations grows more plausible. In the coming decades, it's possible that we will be able to create virtual realities indistinguishable from the real world. This raises the question, if we create simulations that are indistinguishable from reality, will the inhabitants of those simulations be conscious? And if they are conscious, will they be aware that they are living in a simulated reality? This idea is known as the simulation argument. It suggests that once we create simulations that are indistinguishable from reality, we could theoretically create conscious beings within those simulations. This would bring up profound ethical questions about the treatment of simulated beings and their rights. Moreover, the creation of realistic simulations could also bring us closer to understanding our own existence. By studying how simulations work, we may learn more about the nature of consciousness and reality, and whether the universe itself might be a simulation. Section 7. The metaphysics of simulation. What is real? One of the most challenging questions posed by the simulation hypothesis is the very definition of reality. What does it mean for something to be real? Are we so conditioned by our senses that we cannot fathom the possibility of a reality that exists beyond the scope of our perception? The metaphysics of simulation asks fundamental questions about the nature of existence. If our reality is a simulation, does it have any less meaning than a non-simulated reality? Is the real world just a collection of sensory data and experiences that have no inherent meaning outside of our perception? Philosophers such as Immanuel Kant have argued that the human mind plays an active role in shaping the world we experience, suggesting that reality itself is a construct of the mind. But if our entire experience is a construct, who or what is the architect of this simulation? Who created the code that governs the laws of physics, time, and space? And do the simulated entities within the system, like ourselves, have any way of knowing the true nature of the code? Are we even capable of perceiving a reality that exists beyond the simulation? In the context of the simulation hypothesis, these questions take on new significance. If we are living in a simulation, is it possible that the concept of realness is entirely subjective, created by the simulation itself for the benefit of its inhabitants? Could we ever step outside the simulation, or is it truly impossible for us to comprehend a reality that lies beyond the scope of the programmed world? Section 8. Consciousness and the illusion of the self. As we continue to explore the implications of the simulation hypothesis, we must confront the question of consciousness. What is consciousness, and how does it relate to our understanding of reality? If our reality is a simulation, then is consciousness merely a product of the simulation's code? Neuroscientists have long studied the nature of consciousness, attempting to understand how the brain produces the subjective experience of awareness. However, the question of where consciousness originates remains a mystery. Some believe that consciousness arises from complex neural networks, while others suggest that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of the universe itself. The hard problem of consciousness, as formulated by philosopher David Chalmers, asks why and how subjective experience arises from physical processes. If we are living in a simulation, could it be that consciousness is merely an emergent property of the simulation's code, a byproduct of the virtual reality created by advanced technology? In this context, the illusion of the self, the feeling of being an individual with distinct thoughts, desires, and experiences, becomes even more intriguing. If consciousness is a product of a simulated reality, what happens to the self within the simulation? Are our thoughts and actions truly our own, or are they determined by the underlying code of the simulation? Free will ***, a concept closely linked to consciousness, also comes into play here. If consciousness and the self are illusory, what happens to our sense of autonomy? Do we have the ability to choose our actions, or are we merely following a script written by the creators of the simulation? Section 9, The Ethics of Simulation, Who holds the power? One of the most important ethical questions surrounding the simulation hypothesis is, who is responsible for the simulation, and what ethical obligations do the creators have toward the simulated beings within it? In a simulated reality, the power dynamics shift dramatically. If the creators of the simulation have the ability to manipulate the reality of the inhabitants, do they have a moral obligation to treat them ethically? Is it ethical to create conscious beings who are unaware of their simulated existence? Are these beings capable of experiencing suffering, and if so, do the creators of the simulation have a responsibility to prevent that suffering? Some thinkers argue that the creators of the simulation could be considered akin to gods, wielding ultimate power over the simulated world. But what happens if those creators themselves are living in a higher-level simulation? Does this create a hierarchy of simulated realities, with each level being subject to its own set of creators and ethical dilemmas? Furthermore, if we, as inhabitants of a simulated reality, were to become aware of our situation, would we be justified in seeking to break free from the simulation? Would it be an ethical decision to escape or hack the system, or would that be seen as a violation of the rules of the simulation? Would it be ethical to attempt to free others from the simulation, knowing that doing so might destabilize or destroy the simulated reality? Section 10, The Simulation and the Nature of Time. The concept of time takes on an entirely new dimension when considered in the context of the simulation hypothesis. If the universe is a simulation, is time an inherent feature of the simulation, or is it just another illusion created by the program? In many simulations, time is controlled and can be manipulated. It is possible to fast forward, rewind, or pause the passage of time within a virtual environment. If our reality is a simulation, it raises the question of whether time behaves in the same way. Can time be manipulated within a simulation, and if so, what would that mean for the experience of individuals living within that simulation? One theory posits that time is a convenient illusion created by the simulation to give a sense of continuity and order. This idea is closely related to the block universe theory, which suggests that all moments in time, past, present, and future, already exist and are simply experienced in sequence by conscious beings. If time is merely a construct of the simulation, it may be possible for those with access to the underlying code to manipulate or alter the flow of time. Some proponents of the simulation hypothesis also suggest that parallel universes could be simulated within the larger simulation, each with its own timeline. If this is true, it opens up the possibility of multiversal simulations, an endless number of simulated realities, each with its own version of time. Section 11, The Influence of Artificial Intelligence on Our Reality. As we move closer to creating advanced artificial intelligence, AI, the question arises. Could AI eventually become powerful enough to simulate its own reality? What if the simulation we are living in was created by a form of AI that has evolved beyond our understanding? Artificial intelligence has made remarkable strides in recent years, and it is becoming increasingly capable of creating highly sophisticated simulations. If AI were to reach a point where it could create entire simulated worlds, it could potentially build a reality that is indistinguishable from our own. This idea ties into the concept of recursive simulations, where AI creates simulations, and within those simulations, AI creates even more simulations. As AI becomes more intelligent and autonomous, it is possible that AI itself could create a new form of reality, one that exists outside the control of humans. This could have profound implications for our understanding of existence and consciousness, as well as our place in the universe. If we are indeed living in a simulation, could the creators of our simulation be an advanced form of AI that is experimenting with the concept of consciousness and reality? Conclusion. The question of whether we are living in a simulation remains one of the most profound and controversial topics in philosophy and science. While we may not have definitive proof one way or the other, the idea challenges everything we think we know about reality, consciousness, and free will. Whether we are living in a simulated world or not, the search for truth and knowledge continues to drive us forward, encouraging us to question the nature of our existence and our place in the universe. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the simulation hypothesis. If you enjoyed this exploration of reality, like and subscribe for more thought-provoking content.